Muckle damn cult, airy damn please be keeping me wee man.
Old Man Henderson! The origin of Old Man Henderson. There are no previous parts to this, but you could watch other RPG horror stories with that link in the description if you wanted. But I hear this is a pretty good one, so let's give it a try. Waffle House Millionaire says, look, I hate derailing a thread on accident. Who wants to hear the tale of Old Man Henderson, the character who won Call of Cthulu? I ain't never played that game, except on Steam, and I didn't really enjoy it. Anonymous said, alright, then I'd like to start by saying that this GM was a bastitch that totally had it coming. BS tactics to make everyone go crazy, like a D6 with only 5 sides. No story, no reason, just lose 10 sanity. The others continued to allow this effery. We were playing a modern day setting, with the other players being a college professor who found a couple of stray pages of a copy of the Necronomicon and wanted to find out just what the hell it was. A detective who was investigating a missing persons case connected to the local cult, and a local athlete. I think it was football.
Oh yeah, gotta get the sports ball guy in there.
Foosball Man was trying to figure out why some of his friends seemed so distant lately. Oh, he's not just a football man, he has a heart. And then there was Old Man Henderson, who was never given a first name. Old Man Henderson was already a little crazy, and he blamed his life's misfortune on Vietnam. He never went to Vietnam. He was 12 in 1974, and I would be fucking amazed if anyone gets that reference. Not everyone does. It is the song My Brother-in-Law by Tim Wilson, as far as I can tell. Link for those without Google Foo.
He's my brother-in-law. He's from Arkansas.
Old Man Henderson wore combat boots, cargo shorts, and an open front Hawaiian shirt with a wife beater underneath. He was dyslexic and had a lesser case of schizophrenia, allowing him to assume that the reason that he saw crazy shit was, well, because he was actually a little bit crazy. He had a Grizzly Adams beard, and he wore his hair in a mohawk. Dude, this character sounds like a G already. I love his lack of fashion sense. I'm into it. He also never took off his aviator shades for any reason. He had a stuffed parrot on his shoulder named Rupert that he constantly asked for advice while ignoring the other party members as convenient, assuming that they were just hallucinations. Well, I can already see a million ways that this would go wrong, but I guess he's made it into legend, so maybe it was a good thing. Old Man Henderson also had an automatic combat shotgun that he knew how to use. He had also memorized the Anarchist Cookbook. He started the game with a pre-existing hatred of religion, cutlery, and books. But what about the book inside your own brain, Old Man Henderson? Oh no! His motivation was that he thought that the cult had stolen his lawn gnomes, while he had actually donated them to a charity auction, got high, and just forgot about it. Most importantly, he had a 320-page backstory that justified everything, from his casual knowledge of physics to his ability to speak Portuguese flawlessly. You could just imagine the sort of shenanigans that character was involved in. I'm more curious about the type of person that could create such a character, but okay, go off, I guess. The point to having such a long backstory was threefold. 1, to ensure that the GM would never actually read it, and 2, since he would never read it, except for in excerpts, I pointed out to justify things. I could rewrite and change things around completely at random without anyone noticing. And most importantly, the third point, I could convince everyone that I was serious about this character, and that it wasn't simply the game-wrecking bullshit that it quite clearly was. I mean, dickish, yes, but this guy really did have it coming. 320 pages. What did you fill it with? You're just copying life stories from Wikipedia? Yes, he lived through all of these timelines. And so we start with the first outing of our happy little group. The detective was spying on the building of the cultists with a camera. The jock was parked nearby, waiting for the group to let out so he could snoop it out. The professor had actually joined the cult to try and gain information. Old Man Henderson very calmly parked his car. got out holding the shotgun, in clear view of anyone who happened to be looking, in this case, the detective and the jock. He strolled right up to the front door and kicked it in. While everyone just kind of stopped in shocked silence for a moment, he leveled his shotgun on the lead priest/cultist guy and yelled,
"Buckle damn red coat, the airy damn please be keeping me wee man."
Did I mention that he had a nigh incomprehensible Scottish accent that came and went as he drank and or as amused me? What does this even mean? The leader couldn't understand my simple request to return my lawn gnomes. Literally, you think what I typed is hard to understand? Imagine it being slurred at you by a drunken Scotsman. I guess I get the wee men part. Those are the lawn gnomes. But what are namblies? Muckle damn red cultier and namblies? My brain's breaking. The cult leader assumed that I was trying to cast a spell at him in an elder tongue, and he summoned a Shoggoth by murdering one of his fellows. One Molotov, and about 20 rounds later, the Shoggoth is dead, as is the cult leader, the professor. He made the mistake of trying to be the peacemaker mid-murderous rampage, as well as about 10 assorted cultists. R.I.P. Professor. Old Man Henderson then pissed on the Shoggoth's corpse, got back into his battered 92 Buick Century, and went home. The whole event was over in about 10 minutes game time, and nobody thought to get the Buick's plates. The building burned down shortly, along with about half the written plot, and every lead either of the surviving players had. The GM called a break then, to figure out how to fix and or work around what I had just done, and it only got crazier from there. The one thing that I will say for the GM, at least he allowed this to happen. He didn't try to railroad anybody, fudge dice rolls, and kill Old Man Henderson. He respected the room-clearing power of an automatic shotgun. So Anonymous says, "I must have more, good sir, and more you shall have." Typing up the full exploits of Old Man Henderson would take too long. Maybe I could just give you a highlight reel? Anonymous says, "I will settle for that." Alrighty then. Some of his finer moments include dropping a yacht onto a penthouse suite owned by Cthulhu cultists, the stealing of said yacht from cultists of Hastur, thereby starting a cultist gang war, the tanker truck incident, and my personal favorite, Hell on Ice. Which one do you want to hear about first? Dropping the yacht. Let's take it from the top. Okay, dropping the yacht it is. I mean, probably we should have stole the yacht before we dropped it, but hey, I ain't driving the bus, boat, whatever.
Oh, it's like Speed 2, only with a bus instead of a boat.
So yes, dropping the yacht. Old Man Henderson, with his erstwhile companion Jimmy, the jock, and his friends William Brocklaw, a once humble bartender, the now dead detectives player. Old Man Henderson burned down his bar on accident and blamed it on the cultists. One bluff check later, and he's in the posse. And Simon Breckenridge, a British spy, the professor's player, now 6 characters in. And yes, they were more or less all killed by Old Man Henderson. But he ain't holding a grudge. Look at him. What a good sport. Old Man Henderson had discovered that there was not one cult to the Elder Gods, but several. This complicated his search for his gnomes/crusade. He decided to enlist help in making the problem solve itself. Using his contacts, Simon discovered an influential cultist of Hastur was coming to town to try and figure out how an avatar of his god was killed. More on this in the tanker truck incident. He also located the exact dock on which he would be landing his boat. So really, it should have been tanker truck incident, yacht theft, yacht drop. But I guess the yacht dropping thing is the most exciting one. Let's knock it out. Fine. Jimmy, the jock, meanwhile, discovered that the home of the head of the Cthulhu cults was at a penthouse suite downtown, and so a plan was hatched. Put on a rubber animal mask and go in there guns blazing. I saw it on Hotline Miami. It's good. Old Man Henderson used all of his cunning to steal a military cargo helicopter. Reed Shoryuken the pilot and sort of flew off. and he hid it in an abandoned warehouse. Jimmy and Will set up a very expensive surround sound speaker system at the docks, while Simon made and planted a lot of smoke bombs. There's so many parts where this plan could go wrong. But Old Man Henderson, I think he's got a crazy luck stat. I don't know if that's a thing in Call of Cthulhu. That night, the yacht pulled in and we made our move. Right as Simon maneuvered the helicopter over the docks, we set off the smoke bombs and activated the speakers. On one side, a 50-piece marching band playing God Save the Queen at max volume, and on the other side, the audio from the beach scene from Saving Private Ryan. Imagine for a moment what being on the dock would have been like. Utter fucking chaos. Good, that's mission accomplished then, right? I jumped down from the helicopter onto the boat and rigged it to lift out of there, during the course of which I ran into the cultist guy and ninja kicked him in the head, knocking him tail over tea kettle and off the boat. I later learned that he had broken his neck in the fall. Damn convenient. Otherwise, he might have been able to ID me. We then lifted the boat out of there, switched to secondary audio on all sides. My Heart Will Go On, Celine Dion, because I was in a vengeful mood. Gnome-stealing bastards. See, you like to think it's out of vengeance, but really it's because you miss those gnomes. And even without them, your heart will go on. Old Man Henderson, he's soft and squishy inside. So, when the cultists finally got the smoke to clear, their yacht was gone, their leader dead, and Celine Dion was stuck in their heads. Heh, that rhymes. It was not the best of days. Then we went across town in a stolen military cargo chopper carrying a 40-foot yacht and parked the helicopter above the penthouse with the yacht about 80 feet above it. Then we cut the line, jumped out with our parachutes, and watched the yacht ruin a dinner party while placing bets on whether the military would save the chopper, blow it up, or if it would just hover there until it ran out of fuel. No, not with nobody in there keeping it stable.
It's gonna crash.
Honestly, a pretty epic heist, all things considered. This isn't one of those things that you could do in D&D 5th edition. These are the benefits of a modern setting, and I'm sorta into it, honestly. The tanker truck incident. Now, time for what will forever be known as the tanker truck incident. Notice that "the" is capitalized, and this is because no matter what incidents in the future may involve tanker trucks, this is the definitive one. It started out innocently enough. Old Man Henderson left the stakeout in a van outside the evil cult's meeting place to go get some hooch. As you do, I guess.
I need to go get me some hobo booze.
The only people left there were the detective and James Fink, the professor's second character. Jimmy was gone because it was a school night. Old Man Henderson was a bad influence, but damned if he didn't have that kid's best interest at heart. See, I told you, dude, he's a softie. I sussed him out. You can't be that bad without having a little bit of good inside you. That's not actually a factual statement, please. Please don't apply that to your actual life, okay? The cultists see Old Man Henderson leaving. I had a very distinct appearance after all. Very useful in scoring TPKs, and discover my friends spying on them. The detective gets a pretty GAR death, and James dies like a bitch, but not yet.
That's right, son. We don't die, we multiply. Ain't that right? Ha ha. Tell him, Old Man Henderson.
And then Old Man Henderson blows everybody up. It's like, well, you know, most don't die. Especially me. Everybody else is expendable, though. So I'm on my way back, just walking along. The detective and James had been brought inside as a part of a ritual to give Hastur an avatar in our world. He had been banished, and the only way that he could come here is via a loophole. He could only use as hosts people who knew he existed and had thwarted him thrice. And then he had to make them drink the lifeblood of their closest friend to make the binding permanent. In case you're wondering, permanent binding equals game over. Yeah, as it is when you summon elder gods, essentially. Unless you're the one who did the summoning, then surely they'll take mercy. The The first part of the ritual was completed, but before Hastur could take control, the detective broke James's shackles, and he tried to run. He made it as far as the street when the detective, now Hastur, caught up with him, part Damon form. Yeah, demons are pretty fast though, that's why I can't outrun mine. Now, where this church, for lack of a better term, was located, was at the end of a road, on a T-shaped intersection. There was a gas station about 3 blocks away, which is where Old Man Henderson was while this was all going down.
That's where they got the good booze, isn't it? Give me the good booze.
Old Man Henderson sees the shit hit the fans and steals a half-full tanker truck that was refilling the station's holding tank. While I bring the truck up to ramming speed, I toss a 12-pound block of C4 in the passenger seat and rig the detonator to the airbags. How did you do all that? He's like, no, check it out, bro. It's in the backstory. It's right here. I had a 12-pound block of C4 in my bag the entire time. You didn't know? Gotta keep better track of my character sheet, man. Old Man Henderson then took a bracing shot of whiskey, jammed a knife through the gas pedal, and jumped out of the truck onto his heelys. This has gotta be my favorite part. Yes, he modified his combat boots to have heelys. I mean, it can make you go pretty fast.
I want to go fast.
I swear to God, I had not planned for this to happen. The heelys just sounded like something fucking ridiculous and also really in character. I mean, if we're allowing this character, why don't we just allow Inspector Gadget as well? My hand flips back and reveals a 9mm submachine gun. Okay, it's over. We watch the truck ram the detective into the church and then blow him and all of the cultists to Kingdom Come. The truck also killed James by running him over. That is kind of a bitch-made death, isn't it? You didn't even get to see the explosion. That is when the back trail ignited, fire going all the way back to the gas station and destroying it. Continuing my streak of accidentally destroying anything that might lead people back to Old Man Henderson.
He remains a mystery.
I took a moment to call Jimmy.
Henderson here. Figure out what the nasties are weak against.
What's that, Mr. Henderson?
Point blank annihilation.
Click. I also think that is my weakness too, as well. He is an interesting fellow. I don't know if we had to cut a swath of destruction that was quite so wide, but
it does make for some entertainment, doesn't it?
I'd like to see all this animated. Why hasn't it been animated yet? Probably because my level of skill at animating is pretty poop trash. Anyways, Hell on Ice. Does anyone care if I throw up Hell on Ice? It's my favorite of the bunch, but if nobody cares, I'll save it for later. Almost forgot to mention, there was a bar right next to the gas station called the Humble Revelation, which was the one that Will had owned. I probably should be more invested in these characters, but I'm sort of not. I just want to see what blows up next.
Do it, you crazy son of a B-word! For the love of God, more!
Okie doke, we were in the end game. With zombies and Shoggoths chasing us, I managed to get Jimmy disappeared, so it was Old Man Henderson, Simon, and Will going to the final strong point we had, an abandoned hockey stadium. On the way there, we had rammed through a small home and garden store in our truck, and when we arrived, we started barring the doors and windows, when I noticed something. Our trip through the store had netted us a passenger, a single lawn gnome. Oh, bless! They're finally returning! The migration is completed! Somehow, I knew right then that this was it. No lucky turn of fate, no deus ex machina. Old Man Henderson was going to die, but I'll be damned if it wouldn't be the best fucking last stand ever. I then revealed to the GM that Henderson was a world champion figure skater, hockey player, and golfer. The backstory of Doom got one final use. We got almost all of the doors barricaded, but the zombie Shoggoth army kicked in the last door and got Simon. Will was pulled off the Zamboni after he managed to throw the crate onto the ice. The crate full of exploding hockey pucks, that is. lasted a couple of minutes while blasting Bust a Move by Young MC.
Says she wanna dance cause she likes the groove, so come on, fatso, and just bust a move.
Before the situation devolved into totally fucked. I switched to the next track as I yelled, Hastur! 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 The next track came on. It was the Canadian national anthem, which Old Man Henderson begun to sing proudly at the top of his lungs. Oh, Canada! I then threw out the 3 pieces of knowledge that marked Old Man Henderson's blaze of glory. 1. Calling Hastur's name 3 times will summon him, but only if the one who is his truest foe at the time calls it. And guess who that is? When an elder god is summoned from beyond, they suffer a sort of summoning sickness. They're still unbelievably strong, but they can be killed forever if you hit them hard enough. 3, the building had enough explosives wired to make Michael Bay blush. And that, my friends, is the tale of how Old Man Henderson won Call of Cthulhu. Hot damn, old boy just killed an elder god. Good for you, son! I don't think that's the way that the game is supposed to end, but end it did. And, I mean, yeah, by the rule of cool, it's definitely a good way to have things end. Anonymous says, I hereby suggest the use of Henderson magnitude scale of plot derailment quake to be used from here on. 1 full Henderson rates as complete plot derailment. I don't know that it'll ever catch on, but sure, let's put that out into the ether and see what happens. Director's Cut Part 1. Oh my god, there's more? Just wanted to say, OP actually posted a continuation to Old Man Henderson. Shit's whack. Search for Eli Burning, I believe, on Fools. Somebody else chimes in, he never actually posted more than a quick summary of it, actually. Actually, he didn't actually. Also, for those of you curious as to whether or not Old Man Henderson was real, yes it was. I was there. I was the professor and also like 15 other goddamn people, because Henderson had no concept of collateral damage or inside voice. I guess the biggest question that I have is like, was he actually any fun to play with? Was this just somebody stepping on everybody else's necks for their own amusement? I guess it does make a cool story in hindsight. The whole and complete story was fucking crazy, because crazy things were happening in and out of game, and really he only gave you guys a highlights reel. I might end up story timing the whole thing, even though I'm not as eloquent as he is. Seriously, I read the backstory of Doom. What he told you about it does not do it justice. And if you think that's the end of Old Man Henderson, it ain't. We're gonna cram all this into one tale, and hopefully it's gonna be absolutely wonderful. Here's another picture of Old Man Henderson. This is some really good shit, man. What you doing, smoking with cigarettes? It's fun to do bad things. Let's blow up another gas station tanker. So I think this is posted by somebody else aside from the original OP, just expounding from another perspective. OP tends to get emotionally attached to a well-made character. To him, they're a means of exploring a story, and a good story is something that he thinks the very foundations of a modern society are based on. He doesn't mind a bad end, so long as it's legitimate. Botched a role at a bad time? Shit happens. Bad choice in character? Meant to be. Simply screwed by the circumstance? Yeah, them's the shakes. Lol, you're dead because you actually disagreed with my self-insert Fetishville character with 2 katanas. I actually had to stop him from choking the fat bastard. Oh, we're talking about the GM there? Everybody in this game just hates the GM? Yeah, them's also the breaks sometimes, I guess. Now, all of this might make him sound like a bad person, ruled by petty emotion, but the truth is, he's like a bear. Normally, quite chill, not that easy to piss off, normally. Yeah, normally. So, he doesn't often move, but when he does, things like Henderson happen. It was the 5th session of the game with an experienced GM using Trail of Cthulhu, a small distinction on the whole, but one worth mentioning in my eyes, and he'd already lost 3 characters to the stupidest shit. Seriously, the last one, some evil force put a curse on him, and he ended up being killed by a horse falling out of an airplane. Yeah. That is just some abysmal bad luck. I bet the GM thought it was funny and cool and interesting, but everybody was just annoyed. So the GM goes to grab the pizza, because it was his turn to pay, and I could feel the room cooling slightly. OP's expression never changed. He never looked at me or the other two guys. I know you're thinking about leaving, but I want you to stay. I want you to watch what I am going to do. I knew this was bad, because while he can get frustrated mad, which is hilarious by the way, he makes a choking noise in the back of his throat like a murloc caught in a trash compactor. When he gets truly pissed, then he gets calm. We continue for the evening, and about a week later, we come back. He's giving me a ride, and he looks like he hasn't slept in 2 days, and the stubble is almost, but not quite into gangly half-beard territory. Well, this is concerning. The player that made Old Man Henderson is almost as insane as Old Man Henderson. All this for revenge? Why not just quit? I don't know, man. I've done something. I'm not sure it's a good thing yet, he said as he hands me the little binder thing that he keeps his character sheets and notes in. You've done something? I ask as I take the folder from him. I created... no. Created is the wrong term. I felt like it was already there, waiting for me to give it life. I put a thing on paper, and I'm bringing it down on that fat fuck like the wrath of God. Uh-huh, I say as I look at the sheet. Is Henderson his first name or last name? I don't even know. So then I look at this stack of paper that he called a backstory. I started reading it, and I am immediately fascinated by what can only be called a tome of madness. It switched perspectives and tone wildly. At one point, it's written with stage directions in the form of a script. At one point, it veered off into German. I know for a fact he only knows like 2 words in German, while I am kind of fluent. The German was in his hand, and it was grammatically flawless. That is concerning. He was possessed by the devil, I'm pretty sure. I finally find my voice. What? Been asking myself that all friggin' day. So we get to the game and the GM asks what we're all doing. Detective guy's drinking alone at his desk, waiting for one of his contacts to get back to him. Jimmy, the jock type, is struggling with math homework. My character, Professor Filkins, is grading midterms. Then we get the introduction to Henderson. He's sitting in a lawn chair in his house, smoking a bong, staring at a wall that he painted to look like a Hawaiian beach. You know, Rupert, he addresses the stuffed parrot currently resting on the arm of his chair. You're a good friend. Most people would ask for a hit, but you know how much I love this shit. Way better than what we had back at Nam. He chuckles and then begins reminiscing. You know, I still remember the first time I got high, back in my older brother's van. Must have been some good stuff too, 'cause I'm an only child. Ain't that right, Charles? He looks over to an empty corner of the room. What are you talking about? Is Charles here with us right now? Charlie? He then gets up, mildly concerned. Man, what the hell? He begins to search the house in earnest, before sitting down on a chair in his kitchen. Where the hell are my lawn gnomes? I mean, somebody steal them? Who the hell would steal them? I mean, they're worth a lot, but come on. He then pulls out a Sharpie and begins to scribble on the table. All right, 215 gnomes, total weight about 800 pounds, total value approaching 40,000. Not a one-man job. Need help to carry them. Need help to sell them. I'm looking at a large, well-organized group of assholes. That's right. That's my life savings you just carried off my front lawn. He looks into the middle distance. Like those guys up the street. They're Mormons, right? Large religious group come around in the early morning like those damn Charlies. Roops, I think we got a lead. And then he poured a bottle of Jack Daniels into a large Go cup and went and got into his car. I gotta be honest, I'm enjoying this outside perspective a lot more. The narrative is much more cohesive, so thank you very much to the fellow player who came back and decided to regale us. Before I get back to the rest of the party, it should be noted that Henderson looks a lot like Jeff Bridges of today. So imagine all of his lines in that voice. Yes, that is the voice that we were treated to at the table. Anyway, I've had the lead on a cult meeting for a while, and I managed to get an invite. I'm sitting in the front row, listening to a passionate Arab man talk about how there's more to the world than we know. Despite myself, I'm intrigued. Jimmy's sitting outside, thinking about his friends and trying to decide if he should go in and talk to them or what. The detective's gotten his call back and is now watching the scene with interest. A battered 92 Buick Century fails to get their attention until it suddenly executes a perfect handbrake turn and parks at the curb. Oh yeah!
That's a ball of stuff right there. I bet Old Man Henderson does that when he pulls up outside the club too, right?
Back to Henderson's point of view, he's blasting Creedence Clearwater when suddenly he sniffs the air and says, "Morbidge," before whipping around and parking out front and killing the car. He then gets out of the car and pops the trunk. In full view of the detective, he then shoves lurid Lucy, an inflatable sex toy of exceptional quality, to one side and pulls out some sort of Israeli-made combat shotgun and starts walking towards the house.
Oh yeah, this is about to get real interesting.
Aren't you gonna show lurid Lucy what goes down? Old Man Henderson then kicks open the door while all of our mouths are agape, including lurid Lucy, and he shouts the words that let us know the game would never be the same.
Buckle down, cultist, here, you dabblies keeping me wee bad.
So at this point, the GM had not yet realized what Henderson is. I think I'm the only one who truly understood what was about to happen to existential horror at this point in time. Here's another fun fact about OP. When he's at a game table with the character sheet, you are not at the table with him. You're at the table with whatever character he's playing until further notice. I don't really know that he could have metagamed even if he tried.
And that's what makes him real good.
So anyway, the GM decided to regain control the only way he knows how, by killing Mike's latest character via some bullshit. So he summons a Shoggoth. I guess Mike is the name of our OP. Henderson, having passed the will check to not puke up his brains and winning the initiative, comments on how,
"That's the ugliest fucking poodle ever, oh god!"
and then he shoots it in the face until it dies. Then he shoots the cultist guy who summoned it. Then he shoots me, and then some random guy, and then he pees on the Shoggoth's corpse, since everyone else is too busy losing their minds in a panic over the creature that should not be being summoned, and casually sets the tapestry on fire with his cigar as he walks out the door. That's one way to get the job done. And yes, existential horror doesn't work on him. He's seen things that you couldn't begin to imagine. So then, everyone still alive runs the hell away from the burning building before the cops show up. Henderson makes it home, about 3 blocks away, when he realizes something horrible.
He totally forgot about the lawn gnomes.
He runs back to the still burning building, only to see that the fire department had already arrived. They informed him that no gnomes were in the building as far as they could tell. On the one hand, he's relieved as hell since he didn't lose the gnome, and because killing that many little people would probably constitute a hate crime of some sort. Never mind the fact that he just totally leveled a church with the speed and brutality of the frickin' Spetsnaz. Anyway, he goes to try and cook up where they could have gone down at the local pub.
Yeah, drinking helps me with the thinking.
The GM at this point looks up at us from his notes. He's clearly been thrown so far off the frickin' tracks by what just happened that he can't just improv his way out of it. I think I need a minute. Or 10. He amscrays, and I look over to the man that I thought I knew. He had his cell phone out and is asking us if
we're cool with Chinese food, since we had pizza last week.
What the hell was that? Asks one of our fellow players.
Remember when I said I was getting revenge? I brought out the big guns. I don't even have the small guns anymore. I was given some once and I promptly returned them. Won't be needing these, I says. Hello, Chinese food place I forgot the name of? You still got that special on the shrimp fried rice?
Oh, this story is so gloriously told. Yes. I'm glad I decided to power through the first little bit. It was feeling dry and not very cohesive, but now we cooking with gas. And so we are brought into Director's Cut Part 2. So when I ended the last story, we had a dead Shoggoth, a burning building, a bunch of MIA lawn gnomes, and we just ordered some totally bitchin' Chinese food. Anyway, at this point in the proceedings, Henderson decided that he couldn't get a proper brainstorming going at home as to the location of the gnomes. Well, then he could always just try Harry's bar. Good old Harry. He was scared proper shitless of Henderson after an incident with a commie bastard pinball machine prior to the game's start, so he could drink in peace, and nobody really bothered him about the ever-mounting bar tab. So, Old Man Henderson's sitting there, working on a new plan of action with his two best friends, Mr. Daniels and Mr. Walker, when suddenly a news report comes on. Apparently some woman was commenting on how the quiet religious group a few blocks away from the bar just had their shit completely wrecked. Henderson was very interested in knowing that they were not in fact Mormons, but rather disciples of the Yellow King, which apparently were a radical sect of Buddhism that had the details promptly ignored since there was a hockey game on. But then, Henderson had a really good idea, since somebody at the other end of the table had the Dragnet theme as their ringtone. He knew fuck all about looking for people, but a private detective? So, after a few minutes in the phone book, he decides to literally call the first name he saw under the PI heading. By sheer freakish coincidence, the phone in the detective player's office starts to ring. Hello?
I need a man who's good at finding things. Doesn't need a great love of religious loonies, and maybe doesn't mind shooting an ugly-ass poodle or two.
I'm sorry, but who is this?
Name's Henderson. I need some help from a professional.
No argument here. So you're looking to hire a PI?
Yep. It's something precious stolen from me.
And what was that?
Roughly $40,000 of lawn gnomes.
There was a silence, both in-game and at the table. What?
I'm not saying it was cultists, but I'm pretty sure it was cultists. Or aliens, but that seems unlikely given the circumstances. If you're interested, we can talk down at Harry's on the south side, by the river.
And then he hung up. Since the detective was quickly getting nowhere with his missing persons case, he decided it might be good for a laugh. Henderson, meanwhile, had discovered that Harry had acquired a Pac-Man arcade machine and decided to fill the scoreboard with profanity. It's a good plan, honestly. Every time I get a high score, my name is ass. So when the detective arrives, he asks for some guy named Henderson and was promptly pointed to a man in unusual attire who was teaching a girl how to shoot pool. Henderson?
Hold on just a second. The important part of a shot in pool is to make sure it's smooth. Take all the time you need to line up the shot. And don't let him rush you,
he says, and then he sinks his last 3 balls and the 8 in one stroke. Then he turns to the detective, who promptly recognizes him and tries to leave. Too bad for him, Henderson decides to follow.
So how do you think you're gonna go about this?
I'm gonna get the hell back in my car and leave the crazy-ass arsonist murderer behind.
No shit!
He looks over his shoulder back at the bar.
Which one?
He looks at the detective, poking him in the chest.
What?
The church! You burned down a church!
They started it.
Because you walked in with a shotgun? He asked, exasperated at the infuriatingly flawless logic of this complete asshole.
No, because they stole my goddamn lawn gnomes.
Yeah, you mentioned that. How do you friggin' steal $40,000 in decorative lawn fixtures? Where the hell did you even get that many gnomes?
I worked briefly as a prostitute in Thailand. The antique gnome collection was my retirement plan.
Seems solid. What's the return on that investment? Love that. The detective says, what?
Ended up riding some dude's junk all the way back home. Hell of an uncomfortable ride, let me tell you. Not meant for the ocean blue, and I would know.
You understand the logistics of riding another man's junk across the ocean?
Oh, well, in a general sense. I took a course on shipbuilding back in college. That was before they had these fancy navigational gypsy pathfinder space ferries.
GPS. The more I get to know him, the more I like him. Even outside of the blowing things up. He's an interesting character. The detective says, all right. You said you were looking for gnomes?
Actually, that was earlier. Just now I was explaining that I knew so much about catching a ride on somebody's junk because of vigorous study in my youth.
Let's focus on the gnomes. You think they were stolen by a cult?
The only thing that makes sense from what I know. I want you to look into the disciples of the Yellow King and see if they're doing anything suspicious.
Actually, I was already looking into them for another reason. Looks like they've got a hand in human trafficking. Lawn gnomes seems like an odd direction to go in, but I won't deny that they're up to no good. I'll let you know if I find anything worth talking about.
Sounds good. I'm usually at Harry's unless I'm not. Now, if you'll excuse me, I gotta go see a man about a horse.
Henderson then walked across the street, stole a bicycle, and rode off into a plot hole for a brief period of time. Godspeed, you literal maniac. Now here's the question. Do you guys give a damn about non-OP related things? Because the rest of us were legitimately trying to play a somewhat serious game around him. And I wanted to know if you guys wanted the whole story or just shenanigans. Several votes for whole story later. All right. So at this point, the guy playing the detective decided to give my character an easy in with the group, since poor Jimmy was still on his lonesome for the moment. In rolls James Fink, one of several characters whom Henderson had killed, and only one besides Simon whose name ever got remembered by the rest of the group. James is a longtime friend of the detective, whose name I just remembered was Albert Johannesson, pronounced Johansson for some friggin' reason. It's a little character, whatever. Back when Al was still a cop, Jim was a thug for the local mob. They worked up the ladders of their respective organizations, gained the respect of their coworkers, and eventually ended up leaving their jobs on good terms with their bosses. In Jim's case, it was because his wife had a baby on the way then, and asked him to find some safer work. Al ended up in a shootout, where his partner got killed fighting a bunch of crazy meth addicts. Shortly after quitting, they ran into each other by sheer coincidence, and discovered that the other one was the bastard who kept wrecking our job / getting away, and they ended up becoming fast friends. This continued on a fairly regular basis for several years, until the Henderson situation, and Al decided he wanted backup, and there was nobody in the world that he trusted more. "So," Jim said as he walked into the office, "who's the client?" "Some crazy MFer named Henderson." "That his first or last name?" "Man, I got no freaking clue." "Alright, so what's he want?" "Apparently he thinks a cult stole his antique lawn gnome collection." "So, drop the nutter." "Well, there's two good reasons not to. The cult he's accusing, I honestly do believe to be involved in both activity illegal and bizarre. The other is that any man who can afford to just have 40 grand in gnomes lying around can probably write a paycheck." "Why the hell would somebody have 40? Don't tug on that particular string, Jim. Trust me, just don't." "Okay, so what's our first lead?" "Well, I was gonna go kick around in the ashes of the church that my new boss burned down, and then see if there were any witnesses." "Wait, our boss caused that church fire?" "Yep. So, are you in?" "You kidding? I need to see how deep this rabbit hole goes." That evening, they went to the site and discovered the Shoggoth's corpse. There wasn't enough left of it to force sanity checks, but plenty to make them start asking some more pointed questions. The professor ended up on a list of people to look into when this body was identified, and then they found the page of the Necronomicon. Recognizing the occult symbols on it, the detective dropped it off at his office while he went to ask if he could borrow a notebook out of the cold case evidence lockers. Henderson, meanwhile, discovered that During a recent bender, he had agreed to chaperone a dance at the local high school. He still is a big softy deep down, I told ya. So he swings by the detective's office to let him know where he'll be. So he's at the office and he meets Jim, asks him to pass along the info to Al, and then snags the scrap of the Necronomicon on his way out the door, saying that he needed paper. Jim failed his spot check to notice which sheep Henderson had taken. The GM fudged it, probably assuming Henderson was going to read it, and then he could kill him off via sanity damage. Boy, howdy was he wrong. So Henderson shows up to the dance in his usual attire, slightly less scruffy than usual, and volunteers to sit outside
And make sure punks from the other school didn't try and gate crash the party.
The more proper people were glad to keep him out, since that meant that he wouldn't be able to corrupt the youth. That's right, think of the children. Henderson was glad because there was no way they'd let him smoke the monster blunt that he had just rolled inside. Did you roll it up with the Necronomicon? I then realized, as he lit
An Atomica,
as he called it, a blunt roughly the size of a Cuban cigar, that there was currently only one piece of paper on his person. This is not gonna go well. As soon as I found out where he was in character, I went to the school to try and prevent the inevitable. Meanwhile, Jimmy, the jock, was sitting outside, sad, because his girlfriend didn't come because she, too, was busy being a crazy cultist. Henderson decides to introduce the kid to the wonderful world of substance abuse, and like a bro, passes him the blunt.
Yeah, smoke this. It won't make you feel better, but it won't make you feel nothing.
What? Okay. To be totally honest, I'm surprised this moment didn't make the original story, since smoking the giant book of bad juju was the best thing that ever happened on accident. So Jimmy took a hit and totally failed every check the GM sent his way. He saw Jesus, and then Jesus turning into a giant squid thing. In the deep distance, the weed softened the blow by masking everything behind a cartoony afterglow. So imagine for a moment watching Elmer Fudd scream, "Cthulhu Flagon!" and shoot Daffy in the face, only instead of a fucked up beak and a muttering of,
This means war.
he screams, "He comes!" and tentacles rip out of his form to molest wildlife. Bro, we are quite literally high school stoned right now. This is the good stuff. We sure it's not laced with something? This is the part where I had to go to the door to retrieve the precious shrimp fried rice, but I came back to,
So wait, I only lost 15 sanity?
yeah, what now?
I pass it back.
Henderson, of course, manages to ace the tests and then comments on how,
This is some really good shit, man.
and how Jimmy is,
Just a lightweight.
he is a literal child. I don't think he's ever done this before. I don't know that he'll ever do it again. Maybe we learned some hard lessons today. Jimmy then does a bit better, and they get to swapping stories. Pretty soon the cult comes up, and they agree to join forces for the sake of cute girls next door and lawn gnomes everywhere. Ah yes, the strongest of bonds. Sadly, that roach burned hard and fast. When me and Al got there, all we saw was some crazy old dude and some ginger teenager crashed together against the wall, giggling at
Those silly squid things in people's heads.
So we then discover the kid's connection to the madness and promptly discover what he knows. This leads to 3 people who didn't have school tomorrow, both in and out of game, preparing a stakeout of some church. So at this point, we all get into Jim's van and park down the street from a church. The church happens to be at the end of a road, at a T-shaped intersection, and we're parked a bit of the way up from it. Oh, this is the tanker incident. I recognize this.
Man, stakeouts are boring.
Oh shit, Henderson. You have anything useful to contribute?
Not really. Should have brought a book or something.
Would you be paying attention to the building if you had reading material?
Not really.
Then I guess it would defeat the purpose of a stakeout, wouldn't it?
Not if you two are watching. Hell, we could have 2 of us watching. Third man playing bait.
You'd volunteer for that?
Beats the hell out of sitting in a van with 2 dudes who won't even let me smoke.
Didn't you smoke evidence the last time you lit up?
I regret nothing. Fuck it, you guys hungry or something? I'm gonna go grab some munchies from the gas station.
Bring coffee and some cheese doodles.
Alright, back in. Fuck it, just leave the doors unlocked.
And off Henderson went in search of snacks. When he hopped out of the van, one of the cultists happened to see him on a lucky roll, and as he walked around the corner into the gas station, they ran and beat the living shit out of the two of us that had been left behind. About the time we got dragged into the building, Henderson had finally got out of the bathroom. About the time we got tied to the altar, Henderson had stopped to try on hats. Sounds about right. At about the time the ritual reached its height, Henderson was debating which AC/DC album was the best with the cashier. The end result of that argument was, while that they couldn't decide if Back in Black or Dirty Deeds was the best album, Black Ice was pretty boss, and heralded only good. It's a fairly accurate ranking, isn't it? So then, with some tense tests of willpower and resolve, Al managed to free Jim and hold off the cultists while an evil presence steadily took chunks off his sanity score until he was no longer able to resist. Smiling in malicious glee, Hastur began to stalk his new prey. At this point in time, Henderson had just walked out of the store, just in time to see my character get murder-glomped by a monster wearing my friend's face. So he does the only logical thing that he could. He stole a goddamn fuel truck. So then we find out that he was packing C4 because he read the entire anarchist cookbook, remember? And he was making all sorts of tests while gunning it down the road towards us. He made it and bailed just in time for the truck to hit him off of me and run my ass over. Hastur rode that truck to its end while Henderson placed a call to Jimmy.
Hey kid, Henderson here. Found out what the nasties are weak against.
What's that, Mr. Henderson?
Point blank annihilation.
It is a good line. God, that's such a good line. He then hangs up the phone and proceeds to walk off. I finished bleeding to death 2 turns later. That's right, he left me to die. Sure, I wasn't like screaming for help, but he could have at least checked.
Oh, sorry man, I just forgot you were there.
Since I'm not sure how familiar TG is with certain Cthulhu-based rulebooks, I was basically in what D&D calls alive, but with negative hit points. So helpless, dying, but still, there's hope, until the back trail ignited, and the tiny amount of fire damage ended me. And again, he didn't even get to see the explosions. Just sad. My one consolation was that the fire blew up the gas station and took the bar he left me for with it. Then, the detectives player, after the fastest reroll I've ever seen, entered stage left. William Brocklaw runs in and yells about how his newly refurbished bar just got destroyed on the evening of its grand reopening.
Hey man, if it makes you feel any better, I can help you get back at the people who did this.
Who are you?
Name's Henderson. This is my right-hand man, Rupert.
And you know who did this?
I'm fairly certain I do. Ever hear of the Disciples of the Yellow King?
Are you saying this was done by cultists?
Look, I'm not saying it was cultists, but it probably was cultists. Come on, your bar might be gone, but it's not the only watering hole in town. Ever hear of a pub called Harry's? You look like you could use a drink.
Henderson always knows just what to do to make people feel better. So, at Harry's bar, he got filled in on what Henderson knew while getting a couple of drinks on the house. I probably would have been there too were I not slightly pissy about losing 2 characters in as many sessions. So after a few minutes of back and forth, Will decides that he'll get in on it if Henderson can provide some proof as to the whole evil cultist thing. So why did you decide to go after them?
Revenge, mostly.
Really? What happened?
Same bastard who blew up your bar killed 2 of my buddies. And that's after they stole all my goddamn lawn gnomes.
Damn. Well, tell you what, when we catch the guy, I'll hold him still while you kill him.
That's mighty generous of you.
We're making friends. This was the point where we called it for the evening, and at the start of the next session, Henderson headed up a daring plan to kidnap one of the heads of the cult. I'll tell that one next time, but quick spoiler, I managed to get 3 of my own characters killed in one single session. Yeah. Bro, that's a bummer. At this point, you just come with pre-made characters. Okay, this one's dead. Whip out the next one. We gotta get ready to rapid fire this thing. So we are into Director's Cut, part number 3. So, a self called Nowhere says, I got enough free time to do the story of Henderson's hat trick. While killing a god is cool and all, that happens a lot in tabletop games. Granted, it was a first for a Call of Cthulhu inspired game, but I digress. Henderson has another record that I find far more irritating for obvious reasons. Henderson is the only PC I've ever seen to manage to kill the same player's character 4 times in a single session. Namely, mine, that bastard. I'm gonna type this up in chunks around what I'm already doing, so don't be surprised if this takes a little while. Technically, I mistyped the end of the last thread. I re-rolled 3 times in one sitting, but I already had one character ready to go at the beginning. Just one. It's amateur hour. When we arrived for the game that day, I was determined to not get upset at a character death. It's just a game. It's all pretend. I failed, eventually. I don't remember the name of my first character. The session began with the cultists using a mob front, planning to kill the son of a rival crime family, incidentally, the same one that Jim used to work for. I was playing the role of the bodyguard, and I was quickly knocked out and thrown into the trunk of one car, while the kid was loaded into the back seat of another. Enter, stage left, Henderson and Will. They see them wacky cultists up to no good, and they decide to nick the vehicle with the visible hostage. While Will hotwired it, Henderson punched a hole in the gas tank of their second car and lit it off. Then they sped away after unknowingly leaving my character to burn, screaming, in the trunk of the second car. Oopsie. Approximate elapsed time between the start of the session and first character death, 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Wow, we're shattering all kinds of records. I promptly rolled up that second character and agreed with the GM that I should just wait until a more appropriate time to join the scene, rather than in the middle of a drive across town. Then they decide to pull up to a local bar with the Don's kid to help him get off his problem. My second character of the evening's name was Ronald. Ronald was a used car salesman coming off the tail end of a bad divorce in which his wife gained all of their worldly possessions and then promptly killed herself and left it all to the new church that she had found, the Disciples of the Yellow King. At this point in time, he was playing darts. Unbeknownst to him, a cultist from that church just let loose a powerful entropy curse after the car that was stolen from them. A curse with a very specific target, the brake lines of the car, coming in for a hard stop just outside. Oh boy, he gotta get obliterated. Ronald looked at the perfect game that he was playing, and he felt genuine joy for the first time in weeks. And then he was ripped in half by a BMW coming through a brick wall behind him. This was less than 10 minutes after the first death of the evening. I don't know, bro. At a certain point, it's just time to pack it in. Maybe I'm just not meant to play tabletop anymore. It's a sign. Henderson gets out of the car, and the bartender with the mob connections immediately puts a gun in his face.
What the bloody hell do you think you're doing? Trying to escort a young man to safety. Damn cultists must have cut the brakes.
The bartender then recognizes the Don's son and calls him over to see if he's alright. Danny, the boy, is confused but mostly unhurt. Danny boy, the pipes are calling. This saved Henderson's life, but the GM soundly refused to let me just take control of such a politically powerful character just to get back into the game quicker, so I started to roll up another. A cop looking into a lead in a weird house across town. Yes, across town, far out of the destruction zone. It was a weird house that was connected to a cold case that his old friend Al had asked him about immediately before his mysterious death in the middle of a huge explosion. a place the mob had just told Henderson and Will should have some answers for the questions that they had as a favor for saving their son. Well, they get there after me and open the door to creep inside. I've already investigated the upstairs and found notes saying something about a lab in the basement. Henderson, in the meantime, had gone straight down on the logic of,
what the hell kind of evil cultist just fucks around in the living room when they got a creepy cellar to play with?
He finds an old summoning circle down there and decides to spit in its general direction, accidentally activating it as he walks out the far door. Finding nothing of interest in the room, upon discovering that this door leads outside, he circles back around into the house and winds up in the study with Will. Meanwhile, with my new lead pointing me at the basement, I run in, see the horrible thing taking shape, botch the hell out of my save against crawl into fetal position and cry while losing 2d10 sanity. Henderson, meanwhile, picks up a book off the shelf and flips it open to a random page.
What the hell's this gobbledygook anyways? How are you supposed to pronounce this? Alwaya, Cthulu, Fagaton, Kakilial, Arcus, Faldepois?
He turns to Will, completely oblivious to the betentacled beast that he had just conjured into existence behind him, cocked eyebrow barely visible above the rim of his sunglasses.
What does that even mean? What's the point of wasting paper with this sort of nonsense?
Well, I guess his pronunciation must have been pretty good because the spell worked. And now we're all gonna die inside maybe a little bit. Will, having barely failed his sanity check, loses 5 points from his score and points behind Henderson, muttering something about a thing that should not be. Henderson chuckles and says,
he's not gonna fall for that one again. Last time he did, the transsexual he was interrogating vis-a-vis his lawn gnomes had her pimp beat the hell out of him and steal his wallet.
Jesus. I'm not gonna touch that with a 10-foot pole. So he leads Will to the kitchen, leaving the monster to its own devices. In the kitchen, Henderson continues to be disappointed with the continuing lack of clues, while the professor is overjoyed to discover that the liquor cabinet was never emptied by its previous owners, and he helps himself to a bottle. Yeah, and make it a strong one. Then the local cultists, getting a report of Henderson's location, proceed to kick in the door to come and kill him. 3 of them are eaten by the thing that Henderson had summoned in the study, and while they're screaming, the 2 of them take a peek at the next room, and Henderson smashes all the alcohol and lights it up while they run out the back door.
It seems like a waste of good booze, but sacrifices must be made.
The abomination in the basement with me does nothing of importance, while I regain my wits and attempt to leave. I burst out the way that I came, see the fire, and immediately have a second breakdown caused by a pre-existing phobia of fire, which was randomly rolled for. And then again, my character dies, burning, screaming in pain and terror. Much like the cultists and the monsters. Well, like I said, sacrifices must be made. I don't know what you want. Meanwhile, Will is asking Henderson why his car only has Creedence Clearwater playing ever. It turns out that it's because the CD is jammed in there and the radio's broke. Henderson just never bothered to fix it because Creedence is awesome. Well, that is objectively true. So they ride away happily listening to Around the Bend, while I fucking died for the 3rd time in the last hour. At this point, I was beginning to get a little bit pissy, and I was breaking my promise to myself to not let the game get to me. I rolled up another character, determined to do something of consequence in this session. I ended up with a nasty street-fighting thug named Patrick. Somebody in a yellow robe gave Pat a pile of money and a picture of Henderson, asking him to make sure that he disappeared. Now, normally Pat would think twice about accepting such a shady deal, since he preferred to rough people up, since that sort of thing couldn't get you 25 to life. However, this was a lot of money. And I was getting to be very bitter about the whole dying every goddamn session thing, so Pat agreed to the job. I figured that this would end with me either killing Henderson or us getting into a scuffle and then Pat switching teams. Oh, how wrong I was. I mean, you can't gun for him and expect him to not gun for you, you know? You wanted some PvP? Here we go! Turns out, Henderson wasn't a particularly tough fellow to find, since there's really only one crazy old bastard with a mohawk and Hawaiian shirt running around, reeking of cheap whiskey and porcelain. When Pat caught up with him, Henderson was taking a piss in an alleyway on the cardboard home of a hobo that just tried to mug him, who was now dead. Last mistake he ever made. As he finishes up, Pat taps him on the shoulder, and he turns. "You Henderson?" "Indeed I am." And then Pat's right hook hits him in the face and smashes his aviator shades into a useless mess of metal and glass shards, at which point Henderson very calmly pulls them off his face, pulls out a spare pair of shades, puts them on, and comments, "Well, that was kinda rude." He's such an unapologetic badass, look at him go! And then Pat caught him with a left. Henderson then tosses the second useless pair of sunglasses aside, dons a third set, and then says, "Now, son, I've only got one more pair on me, and I got considerably less patience than that. What the bloody all-loving fuck hell are you doing? I got good money from a man in yellow, saying that you're no good son of a bitch who needs to be put down." At this, Henderson puts on a very surprised and concerned face. "A man in yellow, you say? So I'm afraid there's been a very big mistake here." "I've been lied to." You're pretty spot on," Henderson replies. Before shooting out both of my knees with his concealed handgun. Followed by a pair of shots right to the knackers. "But no man gets between me and me wee men." Then he walks out of the alleyway, leaving me to bleed to death. And everyone at the table looks kind of shocked at the fact that Henderson just kind of blatantly executed a player character right there. Yeah, Patrick was perfectly willing to talk it out, but Henderson's like, nah. We are going for the hat trick tonight. I will admit to flipping my shit just a little bit. The GM went to consult his notes, and I confronted him. "Why the hell did you just kill me?" "What? You just shot me dead." "I shot a random guy who threatened my life and started to beat the crap out of me in the middle of a crime scene where I totally just murdered a hobo." Yes, I did. What possible reason could I have to not shoot you?" "It's me, you cock! I've already died like 3 times today." That's metagaming. Henderson, you are such a Chad. This entire Call of Cthulhu game has turned into a Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote skit. I admire his conviction. Really, I do. At this point, I went to make the call for takeout, knowing that I really would have hit him if I had stayed. Nowhere comments again, saying, "Before anybody says anything, I know I'm getting violently angry over a game, and that's stupid. That's why I walked away before it got the better of me." Nobody in the group, except maybe the GM, was that guy, but we all had a tendency or two that could have put us into that category. OP has the thing about rules and about characters, and I'm pretty sure those are signs of his OCD coming to the fore. It's really a mild case, so you wouldn't even know it if you didn't notice the little things, like the fact that he never has the volume set for an odd number. If there are rules in place for a game, he expects them to be followed as written. If someone modifies the rules for some reason, that's fine as long as he knows in advance that there's a change. The dice land as the dice land, and he tends to be very chill on the whole, as long as you don't manage to piss him off. And then he will sink to the pettiest vengeance, but it does lead to some epic gaming. Me, I like being a team player. I honestly hate playing a multiplayer game if it means going against my friends. I think this quirk may have eventually rubbed off on OP as far as Vidya is concerned, but I digress. So, one of my sore spots is basically infighting. If 2 people start to have a fight, in character or out of character, it ruins the fun for me. Is mommy going to hit daddy? Are you going to get a divorce? Yeah, I know where a lot of that anxiety comes from. I don't give a damn if the random kobolds that we're beating up are having a bad day. I give no shits about some random guy in a server that I keep sniping. But that guy I'm shooting isn't Dave, my friend who let me move in after I had a bad breakup. That kobold isn't Mike's new player character. Personally, I think this is where the line between that guy and the rest of us is drawn. We're all nerds and geeks, given what gets posted on TG and, well, 4chan at large on a daily basis. I think it's fair to say that we are all assholes to some degree. We all have in us some quality or two that might be detestable. The difference between us and that guy is that we're at least trying to be acceptable, if not outright good. But now I've gotten off topic a bit. I opted to go for a quick drive to get the pizza since that was a bit cheaper, and we were taking a break anyway. OP decides to go with me, defeating the purpose of me trying to get away and clear my head. On the way was probably the time that we actually became friends. You see, up until this point, we'd kind of just been hanging out in the same group, playing games and stuff, but on this day, I don't know what prompted it, but I got angry, and I kind of yelled at him. He took it in stride, came back with a reasoned argument, and let the matter drop. On the way back, we bickered over some stupid stuff, but I think out of all the crazy shit I've seen and done with him, near-death experiences, epic games, LAN parties, late nights having to go help a friend, that time he talked down a jumper, this was the one that stuck with me the most. The time he talked down a jumper? I want to hear more about that!
Wish you would step back from that ledge, my friend.
OP continues, the reason it stuck with me is partly because I'd never before seen anybody just let their guard down and be honest like that. I won't share what he talked about, except this. He actually bought Saint Anger. OP, for God's sakes, are you ever gonna let me live that down? Nowhere says, that CD was garbage and you know it! OP, I didn't know it at the time! Fuck! Metallica's pretty consistently awesome. How the hell was I supposed to know that that was the album that they were going to royally screw up? It was 2 years before we even met, and I already apologized for it. Nowhere. Make all the friggin' excuses you want, man. The truth's out there now. Now all the internets know that you done goofed. I mean, yeah, it was a different time. You couldn't go on iTunes and listen to a sample. You bought it with the conviction that I like this band and what they put out is gonna be good. Except Metallica really ain't been good for, well, a very long time. Anyways, back to the story at hand. When we get back to the table, and the GM got some new stuff lined up, I decided to opt out of re-rolling and rejoining, even though we were only like halfway through the session, because I wasn't ready to have another character killed off just yet. Will and Henderson bounce around trying to find a lead to work with for the whole revenge plot that they were kinda working on. They ended up meeting with Jimmy to try and talk his girlfriend out of being a cultist, which ended up fantastic. Is that sarcasm? I think that's sarcasm. Jimmy basically agrees to go to one of the meetings if she promised to seriously have a chat with him afterwards about the whole joining a cult thing. She agreed, basically telling him that he'd totally change his mind once he saw what it was all about. Jimmy was a smart boy, and he called Henderson's cell phone for backup just in case things went south. So pretty soon, Henderson and Will are sitting outside the church on the curb, waiting. Henderson breaks the silence.
Man, I fucking hate stakeouts.
They aren't that bad.
Last time I was on a stakeout, 2 of my friends got killed, and your bar got burnt down.
Does this happen on a regular basis with you?
Not causing it. Well, not usually. I remember I got arrested about a year ago for scaring a cook shitless.
What? Why?
I told him I was allergic to olives. I get olives on my everything. I could have died if I didn't check it out.
I mean, that is a good reason. I didn't bring my EpiPen. My bags are all filled with C4. Then there's a silence. And then, yeah, screw it. There's a Best Buy and a video rental place around the corner. I vote we get one of those portable DVD things and a movie.
Hell yeah! Shit, we're here just in case Jimmy calls us. Let's get baked and watch something funny.
I like the way you think, buddy. So they went and got a copy of Grandma's Boy. Oh!
Adios, turd nuggets.
They got high and they laughed their asses off. God, they have impeccable tastes as far as something funny goes. Whatever happened to good stoner movies, you know? I missed that. Anyways, in public, outside a church that they're supposed to be watching for cultists that already happen to know what Henderson looks like. Oh yeah, I guess they didn't think this plan out too much. Surprisingly, nothing actually comes of this until Jimmy calls them from inside the church. Apparently, they just called up some kind of demon and told it to eat his girlfriend and him as a sacrifice to their god. His girlfriend, shocked at the sudden change in tone from the companionable, welcoming air that was there before, suddenly realizes that cults aren't as awesome as she thought. Oh, come on, just give it a chance. You haven't even tried being digested for eternity yet. And that's when Henderson and Will run inside, guns drawn. Jimmy, wise man that he is, grabs his girlfriend and ducks, while full auto shotgun spray kills every last fucker in that room. They go outside and get into the car. Henderson starts it up, while Will keeps the arson streak alive and sets the building on fire. Truly the only way to make sure that it's fully cleansed, you know. As they pull away, Carrie, who is Jimmy's girlfriend, goes all, "My hero," on him, and soon the two freak teenagers are getting busy in the back seat. Will looks shocked, while Henderson lights the bong up and starts hotboxing while cranking up the stereo.
It is just like Nom, bro.
And this is when they pass the cop going in the opposite direction. Aw, crap. To this day, I giggle to myself thinking about what that cop must have been thinking when he saw all that. There's Henderson driving the car, taking a hit off a bong the size of God. Next to him is a dude who looks like a slightly less fat Kevin Smith, looking bored out the window. There's so much smoke inside that you'd think the car's on fire, and there is a couple of people quite obviously banging it out in the back seat. I'd like to think that cop was just thinking about his family, or going to watch a hockey game at a bar with his friends, or maybe finally asking a cute waitress out. Some part of me desperately wants to know why it took him 2 blocks to process what he just saw. Henderson just keeps going, not a care in the world. Then the cop turns around and starts to follow him. I don't think this is going to turn out well for the cop. Henderson keeps going. Cop turns on his lights. Henderson keeps going.
"Sir, pull over the vehicle,"
the cop says into his loudspeaker. Henderson pulls into a drive-thru.
I gotta get some chicken nuggies. Maybe a Coke float. This lettuce has me feeling cotton bow.
The cop walks up halfway through an order for tacos and politely asks what the hell he's doing. Henderson responds with a "hold on a second" gesture and finishes his order. Then he asks the cop if he wants anything. The cop asks him to please step out of the car, sir. Offers of a chalupa are denied. So Henderson gets out of the car, a plume of smoke accompanying his exit. Jimmy and Carrie are kind of blushing and avoiding eye contact, mostly having recuperated. Will, having seen 3 cosmic horrors in the last day, killed a bunch of people, and still coping with the loss of his bar, apparently has no fucks left to give. He just sits there, high off his ass, listening to Fortunate Son. I don't know about the rest of it, but the last part sounds like a pretty good day. You gotta start strong and end strong, you know? The cop interrogates Henderson as to why he didn't pull over, and Henderson responds,
that 'cause he was colorblind, he didn't realize there was a cop behind him.
Then the cop asked why he smells like weed, and Henderson replied that
it was because he just smoked a huge fucking bowl, dude. But it's cool, 'cause he's got one of those medical licenses.
When Henderson was asked about the kids in the back seat, he stated confusion and asked,
"What kids?"
before looking back and seeing Jimmy.
"Hey, Jimmy! When'd you get here?"
You came to pick us up."
"No shit."
He turned to the cop.
"Tell you what, Memory's the first thing to go, right? Followed right by memory. So how can I help you, officer?
Oh, it's so good. After replaying this conversation a few more times, the cop made Will drive, and they left relatively unmolested with their tacos.
Well, that was a close call, dude.
I don't know if he was playing that one straight or not, but it worked, and that's what's most importantly. The final director's cut part is number 4, and we are getting into that now. Yes, it's a long episode. Yes, I hope you enjoy it. I think I left off on the last story with our intrepid heroes having just gotten their hands on tacos and narrowly avoided getting arrested. Henderson is formally introduced to Carrie at this point, and I declined the offer to take over her character to get back into the game. I already had a character in mind, and the session was basically almost over at this point anyways. Henderson, being the responsible adult he is, takes the kids to Harry's bar.
If you're old enough to kill cultists, you're good to drink,
he told them, and grabbed everyone a beer. Sound logic, honestly. We got most of the way into an elaborate The Big Lebowski reference when Mike finally asks a question in a tone of voice that suggested irritation.
What the hell are you guys talking about?
What?
I mean, you guys are clearly having a laugh at my expense. I don't mind that, but I'm not getting the joke and it's pissing me off.
Dude, Henderson is practically the dude from The Big Lebowski. That can't be accidental.
It was? I'd never seen the movie.
What?
I've never seen The Big Lebowski.
What the fuck do you mean you've never seen it?
I'm not sure how that can be misinterpreted. I think my uncle mentioned liking it once in passing.
Yeah, I think everybody likes that movie. And your homework is to go watch it. Jeff Bridges is the voice of a generation! Not the RIPD version of Jeff Bridges, though. The GM agreed to call the evening right there so he could work on the next part of the game, while we dragged our fearless leader to watch what we thought was a fantastic movie. So at Harry's, they bump into my second to last character, Malcolm Reeves. Mal was a soldier who just got discharged from the military after a tour of duty sent him into a nest of monsters. Yeah, I remember that on my tour of duty too as well. He was diagnosed with schizophrenic hallucinations caused by PTSD and sent home. He overhears Henderson talking about cultists and deformed hell poodles and asks if he can get involved. We move out of the bar as the evening begins to set in various degrees of drunkery. We start with the building that Henderson exploded. Nothing. We go back to the remains of the church that Henderson burned down. Nada. Same story with the old mansion and the cult meeting that we saved Carrie from.
Friggin' cultists!
Henderson yelled, dismayed.
Not one clue anywhere.
Maybe if you didn't burn everything down, we'd have more to work with, Mal suggests.
We wage a scorched earth kind of war here, kid,
Henderson says darkly.
But that can wait till we get a lead. Anyone have any ideas?
Jimmy, Buzz, well on its way to wearing off, raises a hand. How about the internet?
What the hell's the internet?
Well, let me unveil to you something that might blow your mind. And then Henderson learned something new about the world. Seeing as how Carrie and Jimmy's parents wouldn't want a trio of random dudes showing up to use their computers, they do the next most logical thing and break into a library to use the public access lines. Sadly, Google had zero useful results under Gorham Poodle Fukin cultists. Disciples of the Yellow King, as Jimmy pointed out, and then corrected Henderson's spelling, had a list of locations and possible meeting times for various groups across the city. There were 10 unmolested locations, and several of them were having meetings on this very night. Clearly, the GM was wanting us to get back to investigating. Henderson, instead, bought enough gasoline to make about 50 Molotovs, and we burned every one of those motherfuckers down that evening, before dropping the kids off at home for a good night's sleep. 'Cause that's important, you know? See, he's a softie deep down. Yeah, he burns down hundreds of cultists in one night, but sacrifices, like I said. Mal buys the first round as we watch the news, seeing our exploits all over the TV. We all got a good laugh when the cops apparently failed their assorted checks, tests, and investigations, since we players decided as a group that going to confront possible suspects meant have no freaking clue what's up, and we're gonna go arrest Jeff Bridges, Kevin Smith, and Marshall Mathers. Good luck finding them. They've all dipped out of the spotlight for good reason. Triumphantly, we all returned home for the evening, and we all catch the news the next morning. Apparently, people are appalled by the hate crimes against this one religious group in the community, and they send their prayers with them. The head of the local cultists thanked the community for their concern, and said that he had the permission of the local government to gather together and pray for the souls of their departed in a local high school gym. What could possibly go wrong? In retrospect, the GM telling us that every living cultist of Hastur would be gathering in one convenient location should have been a hint that it was a trap, like one big enough to be visible from space. This is when Henderson had a cunning plan. He was gonna go there and talk to the head cultist guy. I tell him, yeah, that's a fantastic plan, since Will already shared the summoning of the demon thing Henderson accidentally accomplished with him. So, the new plan, of which Henderson was only vaguely aware, was that Jimmy was going to help the deacon set up a slideshow thing for all the words of the prayer that he was going to lead. Henderson asked,
what significance lawn gnomes had in their worship?
The deacon, after deducing that he wasn't in fact being mocked, explained that the church was rather neutral on the topic of lawn gnomes. Henderson then kept chasing that line as hard as he could, asking about things like
human-gnome relations.
Please tell me no more. Whether the gnomes had souls,
whether these souled gnomes could theoretically be used as sacrifices to Satan.
The deacon then, and I'm quoting the GM here, in the only good line he had in the entire game, gave Henderson a look. A look that can only be summed up as, dude, I banged a Shoggoth and you're creeping me out. Jimmy then led Henderson away from the fracas after he completed his secret mission of changing one of the slides about a third of the way into the show. That evening, the cultists indeed prayed to Hastur. They prayed for guidance and protection. They asked that their dead be avenged. They asked that they be allowed to continue serving. Or, at the very least, that was their intent. One of the slides had been changed to say something more like, Al-Waya al-Cthulu fagdatan kakilar al-Arcus fal-depois. One horrible tentacled monstrosity per member saying the prayers out loud.
Whoopsie.
The GM assumed that we would crash the show. We chose instead to barricade the doors and leave. After the horrors had ripped apart the cultists, they soon turned on each other. Soon the hall was left with only the dead and the dying, while some stone-cold motherfuckers shot pool across town. Yeah, dirty deeds. Why get your hands bloody if you ain't got to? However, we didn't account for one thing. Hastur wasn't the only game in town, and a high priest of Cthulhu felt 100 monsters being called into the world in his master's name. He investigates and finds the scene of the crime, and then looks into the earlier summoning performed by Henderson. Gravely insulted by this turn of affairs, he uses a sympathetic binding, using what little remained of the corpse to sick a pair of hellhounds onto Henderson before returning to his meditations. When they catch up to him, Will's already gone home. The kids are sleeping, and Henderson is out for a walk with Malcolm. We're in the park, not far from his house, about to part ways when we hear a horrible snarling noise. Pistols drawn, we get a lucky shot off and kill one of them while the second leaps onto Henderson's face. He throws it off and dodges its second coming. Guess who's about to get a crit to the goddamn throat? One goddamn guess. Yes, I'm still bitter that no character other than Simon survived across multiple sessions. So, as the monster kills me, Henderson manages to get a few solid kicks into it. The summoner, having detected a kill from his beasts, dismissed the survivor, assuming that he had gotten the kill that he desired. Again, sacrifices. Henderson called the cops, and Mal was given a small but tasteful funeral at the military's expense. The official police reports read it off as mauling by some dogs that apparently escaped heavily wounded.
It's those goddamn pit bulls again, running rampant through a preschool.
The surviving party members raised a glass in his name, while you and I are going to diverge from the sad scene. That night, on the way home, I had a terrible premonition. I now wonder, looking back, if this was the same fey mood that took Mike the evening that he had created Henderson. I lurked forums. I Googled strategy. I shared small snippets of my sob story online while I accumulated knowledge. Henderson was born of madness and one man's hatred towards blind antagonism. I, on the other hand, turned my eyes towards a magic more solid, practiced, dependable.
Evil.
I delved into deliberate munchkinism for one express purpose: the creation of Simon Breckenridge, British spy. I knew setting out that I would never curb Henderson's madness. I could never hope to match it either. I therefore built Henderson's exact opposite: competent, sane, cunning, his karmic balance, the yin to his yang, his frickin' soulmate in plot annihilation, the perfect support character. When utilized properly, a well-made / played support character is a fucking force multiplier for team effectiveness. Since Henderson was already wrecking the campaign harder than anything I could possibly design, I chose to co-op Mike's efforts and make the Henderson situation exponentially worse. This GM's gonna pull his hair out. He's never gonna GM another game again. Since I've been absent for longer than intended from the whole director's cut thing I've been doing, I'm gonna power through the rest of the story tonight. So excuse me while I go slip into something a bit more comfortable and grab a snack. Same thing I did, dude. We've been on Twitch for 5.5 hours at this point. I mean, I recorded some other stuff, but this is the doozy of the day. If you haven't followed me on Twitch, do come through. I'll waste as much of your life as you want to give me. Thanks so much. So OP comes back in and says Simon was intentional? That explains so much. Nowhere says, man, I can't make stuff up off the cuff like you can. Simon was like a week's worth of effort. I skipped a couple of classes to perfect my technique. Switching away from the antics of Henderson for a while, we take the action to London. Most spies who try James Bond level shit end up getting killed. They get lost or abandoned by their own country. Most spies, however, are not Simon Breckenridge. Due to careful manipulation of events behind the scenes, he managed to close multiple gaps in security, sleep with most of the attractive women in town, and pass all the blame on to other people. He had a distinguished career behind him and retired at age 45 with enough embezzled government funds to have him tried for treason. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you gotta shoot your shot, you know? It's all gonna be fine until it's not anymore. Less than a week later, without his spy network in place, his country house is destroyed, and he goes back to work trying to figure out who killed his wife. His one lead skips town on a boat, so he goes to America with only one goal in mind: revenge. He knows that he'll have to use local conditions to his advantage, since he's going in blind and without a penny to his name. After all, the Crown could hardly be caught funding a covert operation stateside. I track the yacht, find out where it intends to make landfall. I send a wire back home and discover that it's an influential member of a group known as the Disciples of the Yellow King. Looking around, it's not exactly hard to figure out why he might be interested in this town. Someone apparently declared war on his goddamn religion. I decide that finding the group responsible for this would be a wise move, since the enemy of my enemy would make an excellent disposable asset for the given value of friend. Deciding to get up bright and early the next day to search it out, I retire to a pub near my quaint hotel room, intending to sample the local fare. As I walk into Harry's pub, I'm greeted by a pair of people in the midst of a heated argument.
I'm telling you, Will, this sort of degenerate activity is what's wrong with this country today.
You're crazy, Henderson. Each generation has its thing. You guys had Woodstock. This is just the new thing.
Come on. We know all those punks on the TV are talentless hacks. The real masters of the craft are dead and gone.
I guess that's true enough, assuming you give proper credit to the proper men.
Well, there's no fucking way in any universe that Tupac was better than Biggie.
Let's get a second opinion, Will responds before pointing at Simon. You there, new guy. Yes? Tupac or Biggie? For what, president? I'd rather vote for someone with a sense of pizzazz. What's Liberace doing these days? Henderson smiles.
I think I like this guy. Sup, Limey? What brings you across the pond?
For the record, even as somebody who grew up on the West Coast, the answer is Biggie. Objectively. I'm not into California love. Give me some of that old feel-good gangster shit. So he says, I'm a secret agent for the Crown. I came here to reenact the James Bond movie and get thrown out under an assumed name. Given your hilariously liberal gun laws, that should take most of my holiday.
Which Bond?
Connery, the only proper one, Simon notes, a hint of distaste in his voice.
Nice.
Henderson looks at the TV.
Hey, they're talking about us again.
Your church? Simon asks, taking mental notes.
Victims of jihad,
Will responds, taking a sip of beer.
Demon summoning cultist bastards. It stole my gnomes, too.
Why do you reckon they did that anyway? Will asks, turning to his compatriot.
Nearest I could guess, some sort of ritual sacrifice,
Henderson responds.
By the way, taxidermist ever finished stuffing that poodle? I figure I could use it to keep the kids away on Halloween.
Simon finishes his mental assessment. These morons will make for excellent cannon fodder. Gentlemen, a proposition. He then explains the yacht situation to the two of them, while Henderson takes a call from Jimmy. He then laughs.
Can you boys handle getting some parachutes and speakers for a rock concert? I just had the best plan ever.
What sort of plan is this? Will asks, watching Henderson intently.
Best one ever. Come on, whatever ever lied to you.
Refusing to explain further, he goes and leaves in his Buick to unknown destinations. Just out there being an agent of chaos, like he does. Will lets out a sigh. I think I know where we could grab some speakers. You think you could get some parachutes? I think I can manage. Meet up back here tomorrow? So, while we went off to do some very mundane things, Henderson went to the local Air Force base. He told the man at the gate that he was a veteran needing to see a doctor, and then drove off to where the vehicles are kept. Since the GM had no idea how base security was supposed to work, he pretty much just walked up to a cargo chopper, going through the pre-flight checks, and punched out the pilot. After hooking up the Buick, he flew across town to an abandoned warehouse and parked the chopper before going home. There really isn't anything more to that story. Apparently, these were the worst MPs in the history of our armed forces. Yeah, somebody's gonna suffer NJP for that. We all come back to the bar, and Simon informs the group that the yacht will arrive in 2 days' time. Henderson and Jimmy rig up a thing that would let them control the various light charges and speakers from a cheap laptop, while Simon reacquainted himself with the controls of a helicopter. The theft and the dropping of the yacht clearly happened at this point, so I'm not going to bother reposting that part of the tale here. My version wouldn't be nearly as funny as the way Mike wrote it anyways. Yeah, I guess you could rewind the video if you want to relive it. How about that? OP pops in and says, yeah, I totally expected more resistance. I planned that shit out like a Shadowrun style attack, and then nothing happened. I just kind of walked in and jacked the chopper. Hilariously, I had no fly-a-chopper related skills, even in the backstory. GM just assumed it was in there, and I went with it. I fully expected to crash that thing in a field, running from like the entire military. And somehow, Old Man Henderson probably still would have snaked his way through. It's always an adventure with this guy. That's why every group needs a wild card, right? So at this point in the game, having dropped the yacht, we were under no illusions as to what was going to happen next. The GM gave up the investigative undertones. We gave up on disguising our war. I don't know why, but the GM refused to give us a cop-out. He didn't want to just rage quit and go, rocks fall, everyone dies. So the session ended with us dropping a yacht, and we all walked out of there fully expecting open warfare when we returned to the table. A week later, we met for the last time as a group after months of weekly games. It took Henderson about 3 weeks to completely destroy any semblance to a plot or any long-term goals. All that mattered at this point was that our deaths were long and glorious and brutal.
Onward to Valhalla!
Ironically, it was the first time that we were all arriving at the table with the same expectations and enthusiasm. Mike wanted to see Henderson die, and the GM definitely wanted to kill him. I wanted Simon to draw it out for as long as possible. John wanted to see Will continue to give zero fucks, so in a way, we all succeeded in our respective goals. And that's what tabletop's all about. I'm glad we could all come together, guys. The game picks up about 3 days after the dropping of the yacht. The remaining cultists begin to kill each other in open warfare, and the police and federal investigators are all flipping their shit over the blatant wizardry that is happening. In the midst of it all, we're hitting high priority targets and wreaking as much havoc as possible. The Buick is sacrificed as a car bomb to wipe out a police station filled with Shoggoths. Goddamn, dude, rip. Remember that thing I said about sacrifices? I'm probably gonna keep saying it. We managed to briefly steal a tank from the National Guard and drive right through a bunch of zombies in a shopping mall. Dude, this ending is epic. Henderson updates his outfit, swapping the Hawaiian shirt for a leather jacket, the back of which is emblazoned with a gnome wearing aviators and throwing up the horns. He also dons a regular pair of gray cargo pants, since he'd have more pockets then. Simon put on a tuxedo and refused to take it off, while Will donned a Flogging Molly t-shirt and a utilikilt. Utilikilt? That sounds great too. Why didn't I ever think of that? There's so much room for stuff in your prison pocket. Where's suitcase when you need him? Can we get back to cyberpunk? That's the kind of vibes that this Old Man Henderson thing has, isn't it? Jimmy and Carrie sadly couldn't update their costumes. Their players were pulled out of the game at this point by Jim's parents in the real world, since they insisted on dragging them to some movie. We decided that that meant that Henderson made Jimmy get the hell out of Dodge, commanding him to continue the good fight, if it came to that. He really is a hero. I mean, also a maniac. Probably like anti-hero status, I guess. So we went back to the abandoned hockey stadium we were using as a base, and loaded him up so he'd get out safe, and then dropped him near a military evac zone where he met his family. We raided an Applebee's to get some food supplies, and then hit up a hardware store along the way. On the way back, we find out that the bad guys have realized that we are the cause of all of their problems, and they were about to launch a coordinated strike against us. They breach the military line between us and them, and start to pour after us like a black sea of unthinkable horrors. Along the way, they started to reanimate the dead and dying of both sides to join their charge. We managed to stay half a step ahead all the way back home, occasionally taking a detour through a place like an abandoned shopping mall or the Home and Garden Center at Lowe's. We finally get back, and then Henderson lifts up a gnome from the back of the truck. He smiles and then sets it back down before turning to us.
Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure.
And with that, he made his way to the rink. We all knew then that it was a last stand scenario, and we started barricading the doors. We managed to get 3 out of 4 entrances almost unbeatable, but the 4th one was being broken open when Will and I got to it. Simon told him to go and make sure he took as many with him as he could before walking into the mass to rejoin his wife. Oh, poetic! Will stole a Zamboni out of storage and set a new high score while running over zombies and throwing ammo and such to Henderson. When he died, they were forced to go over the machine that he left to get onto the ice, and that is where Henderson was waiting for them. He managed to kill a shitload of them, but then he saw they managed to get rid of Will's impromptu barricade. As if on cue, all 3 of the still locked entrances explode open, and a horde, seemingly beyond number, starts coming in. Henderson smiled and called Hastur forward into the world and set the timers. As Hastur stepped forward, he got a rather unusual greeting. "Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all thy sons command.
With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free.
The king in yellow pauses, while Mike apparently hits the limit of the internal clock that he's been ticking off in his head. All right, we win. What? The charges go off. I set him for 15 seconds. I needed to make sure he had enough time to arrive, but not enough time to actually arrive. What? He then broke it down and explained the little pieces of information gleaned from investigative portions of the game, meticulous notes from months prior. Together, they painted a very obscure bit of information regarding the nature of the gods in this setting. But you bastard! The GM accused dramatically, standing up and pointing. You only just now noticed? Mike returned, politely baffled. Oh my god. You've been rused by your own rules! The GM then performed the first and only table flip that I have seen in my years of gaming, before leaving in a huff. Too late to flip the table, bro, you already lost. After a few moments of awkward silence, I realized that, for all the bullshit, it wasn't really a satisfying ending. I'm not sure what drove me to do it, but I stood up. I picked up the table, and I moved to the now vacant GM's seat. Henderson came to a few moments later, most of his body crushed in rubble. A few feet away, he notices another figure.
Sep,
He wheezes while reaching into his coat with his one good arm and pulling out a joint that he had stashed away for future use.
I'm dying,
The form replies, his voice weak.
I must commend you, human. I did not think you capable of such a task. Yeah, you seem the type to know a lot. Something I learned early in life is that no one expects a sucker punch from someone they underestimate.
He then lights his slip with a smile.
True,
The form responds.
You know, I've been following you. You know I never did take your gnomes. Oh, fuck, really? Well, now I feel like I might have overreacted a bit.
Just a bit, Henderson says with a cough. He then passes the blunt to Hastur, who, after only a moment's hesitation, accepts.
You apparently gave them up for a charity auction,
He informs him.
You know, I've figured out everything but one little detail. Mind if I ask you a question? Yeah, shoot. Is Henderson your first or last name? Man, I got no fucking idea.
Oh, it's beautiful. Laughing, the man and the mad god died together moments later. Henderson's body was dragged from the rubble 2 days afterwards, and only Jimmy and Carrie and some old preacher man cared enough to attend his funeral. I would have gone to his funeral. Oh, he was such a softie all the way till the end. He's not a bad guy, just a little crazy. OP returns and says, to clarify, in further detail, Henderson asked for them to not waste money on a corpse. His exact words were to,
just toss me in an old sack or something and send me to the dump. Ain't nobody gonna mourn me or even give two shits that I even lived.
When I'm dead, just throw me in the trash.
That is so inconceivably based, honestly. Jimmy did opt to get him a rather nice coffin and pay for a decent funeral, even if there were only the two of them to mourn there. It amounted to nothing, but I felt oddly touched that he felt obligated to make that gesture. Will was buried nearby, since they were apparently friends in life, and he didn't have much left in the world after his bar burnt down. Simon was quietly retrieved by his son and put to rest near his wife's grave a week later. Jimmy and Carrie managed to get into a nice college together, since the insurance from Henderson's life and homeowners insurance policies, as well as the money that had come in from liquidating Will's assets, gave them a nice little head start on life. Their story didn't quite end there, but I'll let that slide for now, since I know you guys only really care about one epilogue. Henderson opened his eyes, fighting off a migraine God only knows how long later. He forces himself to his feet and squints around at the blank desert horizon. He looks out at the mesas in the distance and the endless sands in every direction.
Well, I'm either in hell or Utah.
He lets out a deep sigh, realizing that he's out of cigarettes.
It's Utah knowing my luck.
He notices a town in the distance, and having no better idea on what to do next, he begins to wander in its direction.
Man, that better not be a fucking mirage.
A beautiful end to a wonderful character. It kind of reminds me of that RPG horror story from Old Man Solman. Do you remember? It's been a while ago now. I'll put it in the comments and pin it if somebody asks me to. But it's probably going up a few days after I make this, so I don't know. We'll see if I remember or what. Nowhere pops back in and says, all right, that's it then. The official final end of the Old Man Henderson story. This was the definitive version, since neither I nor OP have much more to expand on from there. There is more in store for our hero, but it's not really just his tale anymore. Sometime in the future, I'll tell the story of the game that I will never top as a GM. It was a first in many ways for me. It was the first game system that I quote-unquote designed. Admittedly, it was mostly just Deadlands modded to hell. It was the first full game that I ran. It was the first campaign that I named going into it. It was a game so successful and loved by my players that every one of the main characters ended up getting their own spin-off campaign. So, that's it for Henderson, but keep your eyes peeled for when I lay out the Kings of Nowhere. I'm not gonna half-ass that like I did this one, since it is the campaign that I feel that I need to do justice. Well, we'll have to dig that one up eventually. Would you guys be interested in the Kings of Nowhere? It's on Web Archive somewhere, I guarantee it. We've got an additional part here, Eli Burning. I don't know what this is, but it's OP coming back in. And he said, right, so the tale of Old Man Henderson ended when he died. Or so I thought. Oh my god. There's more? We're still going? I'm so tired, please. A friend of mine gave me a call and asked me if I wanted to play in a game that he was going to run. The premise was this. There were various people who were simply amazing during life. Like how there's a normal engineer and then there's Tony Stark. There's a normal driver and then there's the Stig. There's a normal detective and then there's Sherlock Holmes. These people were basically heroes, like the ones of old expressed in a new way. And when these legends die, they don't completely fade away. Sometimes, when one dies with a job unfinished, they end up haunting a place. Some, when they die, become martyrs for a cause, never fully removed from memory. And then there are the oddest cases, when two heroes clash and destroy each other. Their duel continues in another place, a place somewhere between life and death, heaven and hell. Here, their quarrel is settled properly, and the winner gets a second shot at life. I'm not going to tell the full campaign story here since this isn't the time or the place, nor have I had a chance to type it up properly. But in the end, Henderson beat a vastly weakened Hastur and won his resurrection. Then he found out what happens to a god when it dies. It doesn't get an afterlife. It just stops existing, and then a new one takes its old place in the cosmos. So he did something that threw everyone for a loop, hijacked Hastur's essence to contact another god. Nyarlathotep answered the call, since he just loves fucking with the established order of things, and he cut a deal with Henderson. He'd bring them both back to life as normal humans, but he got to keep Hastur's power unless Hastur decided to claim it back. Henderson was then reborn into the mortal world. In his new life, he came across some knowledge that his childhood friend, Heather, was Hastur reborn, while simultaneously regaining all the memories of his past life. Bro, this is getting too deep for me now. Sometimes we gotta let sleeping dogs lie, but it was an epic tale. I understand why it's hard to leave well enough alone. Then, Henderson got Heather drunk, got her to reclaim her power, and sealed it in an amulet. Nyarlathotep does not appreciate the irony and tries to send cultists to kill him, which is kind of like trying to put out a wildfire by dumping oil on it. Henderson was last seen at around age 17, grabbing Heather and using some weird ritual to throw them both into a parallel universe that Nyarlathotep couldn't touch. You could also call young Old Man Henderson Eli Burning, since that's technically his name now that he's been reborn. Eli Burning's definitely not as cool as Old Man Henderson. Henderson had like a mystique to it, because you didn't know if it's his first or last name. Eli burning? That just sounds like a young man with a bad case of gonorrhea, doesn't it? So finally, tell us, OP, what is the fate of the backstory of Doom? Anonymous request, due to the epic levels of madness in this story, is it inappropriate for me to ask that Henderson's full backstory be put up somewhere? Because I really want to read it, and have the backstory of Doom preserved for all time. OP said, hell no, I burned that thing. It was evil. Seriously, the world is a better place without it. Are we supposed to believe that? Note here says that might be true, but since when does anything about Henderson take the good of the world into account? The backstory is part of the legend. Old Man Henderson's story can't be told in full without its release. Besides, it's 320 pages. The only people who will read it are those who need to use Henderson as inspiration. Translation, have jackass GMs. OP says, yeah, I burned that MFer. I'm pretty sure I said that before. There has only ever existed one copy. And then in bold, it doesn't exist anymore, Anon. Take this up on the talk page if you really feel the need to keep doing this. You should have asked there to begin with. Arguing in the Wikipedia pages. And I can't think of a more fitting end for Old Man Henderson. It probably went a little further than it needed to, but like I said, it is hard to let a legend like this die. He killed a god in a game where you're supposed to run in fear from the gods. But Old Man Henderson, he don't fear nothing. It's gonna be a hell of a long episode, but you know, I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, like, comment, subscribe, share it around. If you know some people that got some time on their hands, ReddX is happy to help you burn it. I appreciate each and every one of you for watching, especially if you've watched this far, especially if you join me on the Twitch stream, especially if you donate on Patreon or YouTube channel memberships, or the little thanks button down there. A lot of work went into this video, so I would thank you quite heartily. Also, there are social medias if you want to stay abreast of what I'm up to. But overall, yeah, I'm good on this for now. I'm so tired. I'm going to take a long break after this. But it was all worth it. It was all worth it to see the smiles on your guys' faces. So, yeah, come on back, see what we got tomorrow. It's not going to be this long, I guarantee it. But I do hope that you'll enjoy it just as much. Remember to keep yourself safe out there, wash your hands. And of course, always remember, friends, that you are loved, you are worthy, you definitely deserve it. And I shall see you in the next one. So until then, bye-bye.
It's only worth it if you work for it. I won't stop till they hear me now. I won't stop till I wear the crown.